Stuart Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Land Information, what is the actual dollar value of added investment that has come into New Zealand for development purposes that was promised by the 608 successful overseas purchasers of New Zealand sensitive land who promised the introduction into New Zealand of added investment for development purposes as part of their successful consent application?
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister, as we've explained to the member before, the Overseas Investment Office does not collect that information like that and doesn't have a statutory obligation to do so. However, Mr. Speaker, I have seen evidence. No, you might find this interesting. I have seen evidence of support for foreign investment into New Zealand, and that evidence shows that...
Order. Point of order, Grant Robertson.
We have been down this path in previous questions, and the Minister has very clearly answered the question in her first answer. I cannot believe that there is any need for any more material.
Order. I explain again to Grant Robertson, I am the adjudicator as to how long a minister takes to answer a question. I often allow the answer to go on for longer if I anticipate that the minister is making a genuine attempt to inform the House. I accept that the member has every right to get upset if in continuing the answer it's in any way an attack on an opposition, and then I would deal with it appropriately. But at this stage, I am certainly hopeful that the Minister is attempting to give an answer that's enlightening to the House. I invite the Minister to continue her answer.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, what I have seen is evidence of support for foreign investment into New Zealand, and that evidence is quite clearly shown when over the last 16 years we have seen a number of applications, in fact 67 more applications accepted by the then Labor government between 1999 and 2008.
Order. And I was hopeful that the answer was not going to extend to that part of the answer. Supplementary question. Order. If the Grant Robertson has any further point of order to raise, I'm happy to hear it. But just a minute. But to continue to interject like that from his seat will only create disorder in this House.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, Grant Robertson.
Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised that after that answer by the member, the Minister, you didn't raise the fact that she, in fact, was adding to disorder in the House by directly going against the ruling that you made
and that's
immediately beforehand.
That's not a point of order. That's, in fact, a direct challenge to me as chair. As soon as I've discovered where the answer was heading, I cut the answer off completely at that stage. Further supplementary?
Supplementary to the
question,
Minister.
Stuart Nash.
In light of that answer, can she at least tell me how many...
Order. I'm now having trouble hearing the answer because of interjections from my right. Could the member please start the question again?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In light of that answer, can she at least tell me how many of the 608 successful overseas investors have actually delivered on their promise to introduce added investment into New Zealand for development purposes?
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the OIO actually do go out there and monitor those applications as to what they have done. They have been monitoring them, and certainly in my time as Minister, I have not seen any evidence that they haven't been.
Supplementary
question, Stuart Nash.
Thank you. Now that Stephen Joyce has admitted that, quote, we have not been as effective as other countries in ensuring that overseas investment has provided additional benefits, end quote. When will she direct the Overseas Investment Office to start collecting all information on whether foreign buyers are keeping the promises they have made to New Zealanders?
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that we do encourage more investment into New Zealand, and particularly into the regions, and we think that that makes a difference for them as far as more jobs being created, the amount of money that's going in there and the difference that that makes. And as I say, I am just genuinely surprised at the avenue that this member is choosing to go down when we saw actually 67% more land sold under Labor than there has been under this side.
Supplementary. Stuart Nash.
Does she agree with John Key that, quote, looking 4, 5, 10 years into the future, I'd hate to see New Zealanders tenants in their own country, and that is a risk? If yes, can she confirm Landcorp will not flog off its farms to foreign interests, and that the iconic 13,800 hectare Lochinvar station will stay in Kiwi hands.
Yes, Mr
The
Speaker.
Honourable Paula
What I
Bennett, either
certainly
of those two
can
supplementaries?
confirm is that we are selling less farmland here than we certainly saw earlier. And let me give you some of the numbers. So the net area of land consented since 2008 has been 310,768 hectares, yeah? So around 310,000. How much was actually sold between 1999 and 2008? 941,000. 941,000. So yes, I do agree that we will not be tenants in our own land, and this side is making sure of that.
Mr Speaker.
Order. Supplementary
Check your own
question.
numbers. Check your
Stuart
numbers.
Nash.
To the Minister, how can New Zealanders have any confidence that we will not become tenants in our own land when she has not turned down one application to buy productive New Zealand land in almost 3 years?
The
Speaker,
Honourable Paula Bennett.
They can have confidence because they've got a national government and not a Labor one. They can have confidence because we actually changed the system to ensure that we have a vetting screening earlier so that when we decline, they don't come up in the decline numbers, but actually we're pushing them back. They can have assurance because literally hundreds of thousands of fewer hectares have been sold under national than were under Labor. Look in the mirror.
Don't come back.
Order. Question.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order. The
Point of order,
Honourable Paula
Mr
Bennett.
Speaker. I'm not sure I need to seek leave, but
Order.
I'd like to table a piece of paper that was from my office, which quite clearly states that the net area of land consented under Labor was significantly more
Order.
than under National.
Order. I am not going to put the leave. The Minister certainly, if she requires, does have to seek leave to have the paper tabled, but I'm not going to put the leave on the basis that the information has been clearly outlaid in the answer the Ministers there just given to the question. It doesn't add further information to the debate. Question.